Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. And of course, we couldn't be here without the master of ceremonies, the Hall of Famer himself, Double A, the enforcer, the founder of the Four Horsemen. It's Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Man, better than I deserve. Excited to be talking about SummerSlam with you. We have had a lot of fun covering some of these old shows from back in the day. And very recently, we've been covering all things 2010. Well, here we are, SummerSlam 2010. It's going to be a big show, and there's lots to talk about, especially with everything that's happening with the Nexus and around all of that. Let's jump right into it. We should remind everybody this went down August 15th at the Staples Center in LA. It's got 17,463 fans there at the Staples Center. The paid amount, Meltzer thinks, is around 14,000. The gate's going to be roughly $875,000, about the same amount of folks that were there the prior year. This pay-per-view is going to get around 350,000 buys. The 09 version got around 369,000 buys. So 19,000 fewer pay-per-view buys, but back-to-back shows for SummerSlam at Staples Center. It really did become sort of the home of SummerSlam for several years. How was LA as a wrestling market back in the day and in the more modern era, do you think?
Well, if you think SummerSlam, you think beach, you think outdoors, you think nice weather, which I think just fit LA perfectly, and they would do some shoots from down at the beach and, some talent during the course of the week would go down there and roam around and go to Venice Beach and different places. And it just made for that beachy environment, which I think fit perfectly for SummerSlam.
It really does. I liked it when it was sort of an LA thing. And of course, more recently it's become a New York thing, but I think the plan was for that to be different. But of course, these days, as we know, everything is in Orlando. But it's going to get those shows, I guess, 09 until 14, and then it moves to Brooklyn and, sort of becomes a staple. And when I think of that, I think of sort of what you guys did with WCW, where Halloween Havoc was at MGM Grand over and over and over. And of course we saw the same thing with, Starrcade. We had several of those in DC. Do you like the idea of there being sort of a home arena for a branded show like that?
Well, when you have so many, and there was a lot of pay-per-views, during this era, the fact that you could brand one to a particular city, it became theirs. And it was like you started to recognize, okay, so-and-so pay-per-view is going to be in this town. You knew that people could plan their travel. If you put SummerSlam, which is during the summer, people are off, and you look at the makeup, the chemical makeup of those big shows like WrestleMania and SummerSlam, those crowds came from everywhere. They came from Japan, overseas, all the different continents were pretty much represented, and putting it in LA just made it closer for those people to travel to. And you had so many people from so many different countries on those big shows like Royal Rumble. I would say the big three: Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and SummerSlam. And you don't put them in that order, obviously, but that's the three big shows. And a lot of people come from international audiences to come and see those shows. So I thought LA was perfect for SummerSlam. It just felt like SummerSlam.
Let's remind everybody we're fresh off of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, which we recently did a show on, but let's talk about some sort of news and notes. In the middle of August, Linda McMahon captures the Republican nomination for becoming a senator in Connecticut. McMahon won handily, largely based on spending more than $20 million of her own money, among the most of any candidate in United States history. Did you follow any of this? And were you surprised that this was a path she wanted to pursue?
Well, I just know this about Linda McMahon. Every time I've ever been around her, she was always so polite and so nice to me. I mean, every single time. And that meant a lot to me, someone of, of her stature. And she just made a point to be polite. And she, for somehow remembered, my son's name and stuff like that. And that goes a long way when you're a woman of her stature. And we were all pulling for her. I don't bring my politics, to work with me ever. I think that's kind of a personal thing. Your politics is your own personal building, but our business, excuse me. But we're all pulling for her. Of course we were. We knew that, how that would help our company and how it made us look and would legitimize us even more, which we're trying to do constantly. And we're all pulling for Linda to win. That's for sure.
Meltzer would write about the business. He says, largely due to disappointing domestic pay-per-view numbers, World Wrestling Entertainment has what Chairman Vince McMahon called a lousy second quarter, although the company remained profitable. For the second quarter, they took in $106 million and ended with a $6.2 million profit. The prior year, they took in $138 million and posted a $19.8 million profit. Were you keeping up with any of the earnings, and did you think that was a barometer for maybe what might about to be happening in the business, or was it completely off your radar in this era?
No, I had my hands full doing my job. If they brought it up, at a production meeting or something, then I would look at that, and sounded like a big number, sounded like a good profit. But it didn't, to me, that's so far out of the realm of what my job description was. I mean, I would hear it and it'd go in one ear and out the other. I knew the company was doing good. I would see expansions in every area, and, you could tell that they were spending a lot of money to make money. So business is usually good when that's happening.
Absolutely. Let's also mention that the investor call, when he's acknowledging, hey, we had a bad quarter, he says, quote, "We're looking at SummerSlam reversing the downward spiral. We look at SummerSlam as the kickoff of the new talent integrating with others." So he's putting a lot of stress and pressure here on this particular show. And again, an $875,000 gate with 17,000 people in the building. Hard to complain about that. And even though maybe fewer people are buying the pay-per-view, 350,000 buys would still be considered very, very strong. Let's talk about some bad news. On August 12th, we would lose the guy who wrestled as Lance Cade in the WWE. He's only 29 years old. He was married with 2 kids and a stepson. I believe the coroner's report would say it was an accidental overdose. It was mixed drug intoxication, complicating cardiomyopathy. And he's probably most notable for training alongside Bryan Danielson and Brian Kendrick with Shawn Michaels. But he did have, 3 separate tag team title runs with Trevor Murdoch. Good looking guy. A lot of people thought he had a big upside in the business, and he left us way, way too soon. You had an opportunity to meet and work with him a little bit. What can you tell us about Lance Cade?
Only that the guy was always smiling. He worked hard. He looked good. He had a lot of talent, and Him and Murdoch were a great team. They were one of my favorites. I would pick at them all the time because, I mean, I knew they had talent and they knew I was just picking at them. But the guys were, you had the one really good looking guy, Lance Cade, and Trevor Murdoch was like a throwback maybe to the 70s. He looked like Dick Murdoch, just a smaller version. And they just, they were oil and water, which makes for a lot of great teams. And the guys could go out and they could work, both of them. And I think that we did, like you said, lose a good one way too soon. I don't know what he did in his personal life was his own business. And the fact is that he is gone and there's no way to fix it. And but I always enjoyed every moment that I spent with him. He was a good kid.
Yeah, it's a shame that we lost him and that unfortunately, he had such a young family as well. Let's talk about some other bad news. Unfortunately, Taryn Terrell, who's 24, was indefinitely suspended by the company on August 9th when the company found out she'd been arrested by police in West Los Angeles on a domestic disturbance early that morning. Her and her husband had went to a party at the Playboy Mansion on August 8th in LA. And then they got into a loud enough argument where hotel security and police were called. It's a mess. It's a private matter, but I guess if you don't report that type of stuff to the WWE, they don't take too kindly to that. They feel like they need to be in the news since you're a public figure. Is that fair to say that might be their attitude?
Well, yeah, they want you to, them to be the first one so they could start damage control. I would suggest the timing was terrible with Linda running for a public office. They didn't want any negative press, which would, hurt her chances, on running for office. So the timing might have been terrible as well. But yes, it was when they first decided to go PG product, they stuck to their guns and they'd be in the company. They didn't want anything that was not PG. And that would be considered not PG, domestic violence.
Oh, of course. Well, and I don't even know I don't know what's in the report exactly. I just know it was a situation with her and her husband, Drew, who we know, and that the hotel security was involved. But either way, I believe, the policy was, at least according to Meltzer, the instigator has to leave for a cooling off period. So we don't know what really happened. And it seems like all's well that ends well, but it is a blip on the radar for the WWE where they're like, this might not be a good look for us. Somebody they do think is going to be a good look for them is Alberto Del Rio. It's written by the Observer. Management likes him because they're looking for another Hispanic star because Rey Mysterio is one knee injury away from possible retirement. He's done remarkably well on his vignettes, so he's got a shot at being a legit star, which I sure didn't see when I thought it would just be him without his mask in FCW and not getting over there. He's done well with management, but some wrestlers feel he's aloof, kind of like his gimmick. Although I've joked about it, the term that he's got Mil Mascaras blood in him has gone around, and he's been talked about as it maybe not rubbing guys the wrong way, but he's just a little different. That's sort of Meltzer's pitch. What was your impression of Del Rio? We know that he's going to be a big star with you guys, and then things don't go exactly according to plan. But what was your firsthand experience with ADR?
Well, it's funny. I know that Vince liked him, and, he's a handsome guy. Vince looks at cosmetics first and everything else next. I never had any issues with him as far as being his agent or producer. Never had any arguments, but it's funny that he's on the radar for this conversation because I have heard that, some of the other guys, I don't even know how I would put it, but just had, some less than stellar business dealings with him as far as trying to do business and conversations and things of that nature. So, who knows? Who knows what to believe? There's been a lot of stories since then. I know that he's been through some trials and tribulations. I just hope he's getting his life straightened out and everything's going good for him. at this time, I do know that Vince liked him and wanted to go with him. So we tried to do everything we could do to make that come true.
They're also going to try everything they can with Daniel Bryan here. We should mention and remind everybody that Bryan was fired on June 11th, days after participating in the original Nexus kickoff angle, and he was gotten rid of here for choking the ring announcer Justin Roberts with a tie, which is against the policy. And I think the idea was, let's go out here and raise some hell and tear up ringside. And he improv that because he, Justin was wearing a tie, and maybe it upset some sponsors, maybe because of Linda's thing. Either way, he's caught in the fallout and he's gone, but he's going to come back here at this show. Meltzer would write, based on the best information we have, Danielson was contacted about 2 weeks before the show and canceled his bookings for both the Gathering of the Juggalos in Illinois and for the New York Wrestling Connection show in Port Jefferson Station, New York. If this was a planned thing from the start to bring him back for the SummerSlam main event, it would have made no sense for him to book himself on weekend shows that same weekend or book dates after mid-August. WWE also forced him to cancel several, but not all of his independent bookings, including a date for Mikey Whipwreck, and some shows in Massachusetts where they don't want him working an indie date the night before the Night of Champions pay-per-view in Chicago. But he is still going to make some shows for Evolve and Dragon Gate USA. Meltzer would write, it's been known that Pat Patterson and Jim Ross had been pushing Vince McMahon to rehire Danielson, who is back here as Daniel Bryan. Whatever it was, he was told to keep it quiet and to be unveiled as the 7th member of Team Raw, a spot teased for The Miz, and opened up when they did a knee injury angle with Great Khali on Raw the prior week. They put a tarp over the ring before the show when it came time for the run through and snuck him in so that nobody other than those in the match would see him or know about it. The format sheets for the show listed a 7th man in the match, but had no name. Still, canceling his weekend appearances, citing a family gathering, seemed suspicious. Even more suspicious as people were coming into the arena and the company was checking every sign. It became obvious when so many of the confiscated signs had anything that mentioned Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson. This is kind of fun, I guess. They're trying to keep it a real secret. It feels old school, and that's part of the fun of being a wrestling fan, right, Arn? The big surprise.
Well, sure. I don't think this was something that was planned from the beginning. I think he did get fired, 100% got fired, but I think the backlash from the audience maybe caused him to rethink it and put it back together, because Daniel would have never booked himself if this was going to be just some phantom angle. He would not have booked himself for those other promoters because, that was where his beginnings were. He was loyal to the indies. He was loyal to those promoters. He would not have booked himself with those companies knowing that he was going to cancel later. Doesn't sound right to me. He was just booking his living going forward, figuring, it was over with WWE. So I think that the backlash caused them to rethink this, and they put this angle together, and they sat on it pretty good, everybody. And so it was a surprise for the most part, I think.
Let's talk about the show itself here. Evan Bourne is going to pin Zack Ryder in a dark match, but our first match on the show is to what will become world champions, Dolph Ziggler and Kofi Kingston, here for the Intercontinental title. Dolph comes in with the IC title, and they're going to go to a no contest when Nexus lays out both guys. To really get our show kicked off, though, Vicky Guerrero is going to come out and get super heat. What'd you think of this match and the Nexus interference? I mean, it sort of sets the tone for sure.
Well, I think you could have probably had a finish in the first match and then did exactly what you did, have the Nexus come down and flatten everybody. But you could have got a finish in first, I think. Having a DQ in the very first match of the night might not have been the best call, I don't think.
Yeah, listen, in a traditional sense, I totally get it. Knowing the way this is going to end, though, it does feel like we're trying to solidify Nexus as being sort of the new version of the NWO. So I could go either way on it, but we know these guys are going to both have big things in their future. Dolph and Kofi, is it possible for them to even have a bad match? I don't know that I've seen one.
I doubt it very seriously. Both tremendous performers, and look where their careers have blossomed, where they're at today. They're still tremendous performers. So, I'm sure the match was tremendous, competitive. Two great guys to get the crowd rocking and rolling. But sometimes you want to set the mood for the night, not knowing the Nexus are going to come down. It just seemed like to me you could have got a 1, 2, 3 Duke in the air, and they started falling out of the ceiling. Here they came. Just one man's opinion.
Let's talk about the next match here. We've got Melina and Alicia Fox for the Divas title. Back in December of 2009, Melina would tear her ACL at a house show, which caused her to vacate the Divas title at a fatal 4-way in June. Fox would win the title in a fatal 4-way against Gail Kim, Maurice, and the defending champion Eve. Then she would retain that championship against Eve at Money in the Bank. Then in early August on Raw, Melina would make her return and attack Fox. And that gets us to here. 5 minutes, 21 seconds. Melina gets the win. It gets a quarter star. This is before the Divas Revolution. It sort of sticks out like a bit of a sore thumb now. You watched it this week for the first time in 10 years. What'd you think?
Well, I think logistically the match was fine. We just, at that point in history, the ladies had not been built or promoted as world-class workers. They were out there to basically, fill a slot. Not that the two were bad or their work wasn't good. It just was not up to the level that has become today. And they were used in, different capacities. I know that with Melina, with M&M, they were a great package. And they were an awesome package together, and they were good partners for each other. And that's how you kind of recognized them. Her on her own against Alicia, I'm not sure had box office, but it wasn't meant to have to draw the house anyway. So I think it was what it was.
This is the only women's match on the show. I think there was supposed to be a tag match with Michelle McCool and Layla taking on Kelly and Tiffany. But because of Tiffany's arrest, we talked about earlier, that match winds up being pulled off the show. Next up, it's a handicap match. It's Big Show taking on CM Punk, Luke Gallows, and Joseph Mercury. They're calling themselves the Straight Edge Society. As a reminder, in May at the Over the Limit pay-per-view, Punk lost a match to Rey Mysterio, forcing Punk to shave his head bald as a result of that stipulation. Afterwards, Punk starts wearing a mask until Big Show removes it until the July 16th SmackDown. And afterwards, Punk's Straight Edge Society masked Mystery Man faces Big Show in a match. He has his own mask removed, revealing him to be Joey Mercury. And on the 30th of July, we see the Straight Edge Society attack Big Show and stomp his right hand into the ring steps, and they break his hand. And it's announced the following week that Big Show gets his revenge, but it's got to be 3-on-1. And when we see Big Show come out, he's got the right hand bandaged up. It looks like it's in sort of a makeshift cast. It's black, but he's got a white X on it, similar, I guess the opposite rather, of what Punk wears to the ring. And before they ever get started, they have, I think Dr. Chris Amon jump up there and cut the wraps off to reveal that nope, it was all a ruse. His hand is just fine. Little old school Southern wrestling. I thought this match was more fun than maybe Meltzer did. He gave it a 1 3/4 stars. Big Show gets the win. What'd you think?
I always liked Big Show and his performance. And when he was healthy, he could go out there and create some excitement. You got to always remember the guy he's a giant. And, it's not easy when you're a giant to have a normal match with normal sized guys because it's just not plausible. But he always did his best to make everything make as much sense as it could. And 3-on-1 seems like, okay, maybe you got a fair fight until you figure out that Show is just what he says he is. He's a giant. So I thought it was a fun match. It had, like you said, the a little bit of a swerve on the hand being okay. And I'm sure those guys did everything they could to make it as exciting as they possibly could. And you never lose when you're putting, your giant over. I don't think you can go wrong there.
No doubt. And it's fun to look back and see Punk here and Gallows here and Mercury here. It feels like 100 years ago. And I think Gallows has said years later that Joey Mercury, did he actually tear his pec during this match with Big Show here?
I don't remember. That could be possible, but I don't specifically remember that.
Let's take a look and see what we've got next. We've got Kane talking to an empty casket like the Undertaker was there. Sheamus shows up and says he wants to borrow the casket to put Randy Orton in it because it's way too big for Mysterio. Kane tells him no, and Sheamus tells Kane that if the two of them form a tag team, they'd be unstoppable. And Sheamus notes that he's the real big red monster, and it looks like they might be building towards something in the future here. And then we see Miz cut a heel promo saying he has accepted John Cena's offer to wrestle for Team WWE, and he's going to be in the main event. When he asked the crowd if he should join Team WWE, everyone boos. And Miz claims that Cena has begged him to join the team. And he claimed John Morrison admitted that he was Marty and Miz was Shawn. Pretty fun little promo here from Miz. And next up is the title match with Randy Orton and Sheamus. They get plenty of time here, 18 minutes and 56 seconds. Randy Orton gets the win by DQ. And Meltzer would write, the announcers are pushing this as being the biggest championship in the history of sports entertainment. It's just kind of fun. 3 stars. Although there is a "We want a Miz" chant going, which sort of took me by surprise. I don't think Randy Orton gets the credit he deserves for being one of the all-time best. This match is another example of that. I don't know what people's expectations were of Sheamus, but I know certain parts of the crowd didn't seem like they were ready to accept him. But you sort of forget all that and get lost in the story. I really like this match. What'd you think?
Well, I just don't like Randy as a babyface.
Right.
He's not at his best. He's never been at his best. But when Randy works heel, he is the best heel in the business. Certainly one of them specifically. And it was a very physical match. Sheamus is a very physical guy. He's a guy that makes you believe. So I'm sure this match got better as it got longer. There's your second non-decision on a pay-per-view of the night. Some people don't keep up with that, Conrad. I do, because if you flew in from Tokyo and you got your family there and you spent God knows how many thousands of dollars to come to this, 2 non-decisions at this point of the night are a lot. You pay to see winners and losers, and there's no reason you couldn't have got a finish in both of those matches and moved on. Pay-per-views are supposed to be winners and losers, and they have to be something different from Raw and SmackDown. If not, why spend that money to see them?
I noticed the same thing you did. It feels like the crowd really started to get into it at like that 13, 14 minute mark. I mean, when you've got an 18-minute match, I guess in a perfect world, they'd start hot and stay hot the whole time. But if you're going to have your crowd pick a spot to get into it, you want it to get to a fever pitch at the end. And that's what this looked like it was going for. Of course, Sheamus goes for a chair shot. Orton ducks, kicks Sheamus low, gives him the RKO on the announcer's table, which didn't break. And even though Sheamus is laying there, I think everybody was sort of ready for the Miz cash in here. Do you think this could have been a spot for a Miz cash in, or should have been maybe?
I don't know. I think possibly. The conditions usually when they're at their best for a cash in, or somebody wins, but just barely. And both guys are basically in a double knockout scenario to where they're just spent. And the champion has pulled one out, but man, that's all he had left. And the scene is usually one of those that the second the guy with the Money in the Bank briefcase starts walking down the ramp and they're looking at 2 dead bodies, they get it right away. That's usually your ideal scenario. And the more you can have that looking like, okay, here he comes, and you just watch the guy walking down, present the briefcase, everybody's still down. Okay, the referee acknowledges this is going to be for the title and lets the audience know before anybody in the ring starts to stir. That's your best case scenario. So this could have worked. I'm not sure if it would have been 100% the best time, but might not have been a bad spot.
In the arena, they turn the lights off and show the trailer for the movie Legendary and sneak Undertaker in to get under the ring. And the next match is for the world title. It's Kane defending against Rey Mysterio. As a reminder, on the May 28th SmackDown, the Undertaker defeated Mysterio to qualify for the Fatal 4-Way match for the world title in June. And during the match, the Undertaker suffers a very legitimate injury, forcing him to be written out of the match. And, they find him in a vegetative state by Kane over the Memorial Day weekend. And as a result, Kane accuses several wrestlers of incapacitating his brother and attacks him. Rey wins a battle royal to replace the Undertaker, last eliminating Kane, and then goes on to defeat the defending champion Jack Swagger, Big Show, and CM Punk to win his second world heavyweight title at Fatal 4-Way. At the Money in the Bank, Kane would win that ladder match for the Money in the Bank, but then cash it in on Mysterio later in the evening after Mysterio had defeated Swagger to retain the title. So that's where we are. We're sort of caught up now. And, yeah, they get a ton of time, at least for a Kane match, 13 minutes, 32 seconds, 2.5 stars. I thought they did a good job sort of telling the story. I've always liked the dynamic of, David versus Goliath, so to speak. And you get that in most Mysterio matches. And then there is the big reveal where they open the casket and there's nothing there, but they open it a second time and there's the Undertaker. And then the Undertaker sort of getting nose to nose with Rey Mysterio. There was some good drama in this. The crowd was really, really excited to see the Undertaker. I mean, it was a genuine surprise. And I like the way they did the tease where it's empty once, but then he's in it the second time. You saw it this week for the first time in 10 years. What'd you think?
It was a nice twist. I don't know that Rey got nose to nose with the Undertaker unless he was standing on a heap of Coke crates.
Well, the Undertaker crouched down and got nose to nose with Rey, who's like on the bottom rope, sort of beat up. And just the idea, you could feel the tension of Rey Mysterio being nervous about the Undertaker. I mean, what an intimidating figure, especially when he climbs out of a fucking casket.
Don't get hot. I was making a bad joke. But I can tell you this, if you're Rey Mysterio and you've been fighting Kane and now the Undertaker shows up, I mean, can't you just find a building to jump off of? Does it get any worse than that? If you're a Rey Mysterio fan, you can definitely feel his pain and the anguish and the dread of what's supposed to follow, I
actually liked the way this went down. Meltzer didn't know. He says, Kane blocked the 619 and kicked Mysterio into the casket. Mysterio got out. Eventually Mysterio hit the 619 and goes for the springboard splash, but Kane went to get his knees up and Mysterio blocked it and cradled him. But then Kane came back with a high kick and a choke slam for the clean win. He would continue. Kane went to put Mysterio in the casket, but Mysterio got out and Kane choke slammed him 2 more times and finished him with the tombstone piledriver. He went to put him in the casket, opened the lid, and there's Undertaker. Kane freaked out. Undertaker gets in the ring, went to the downed Mysterio, screams at him about why he did it. Mysterio swears he didn't. Undertaker said he believed him, and then he snatched his throat. Kane smiles. Undertaker does his slit throat motion like he's going to finish Mysterio, but then turns to Kane. Here's where we differ. Meltzer says, these dramatic swerves that make no sense are so old. Undertaker went after Kane, but Kane was too powerful and chokeslammed him and left him laying after a tombstone. Sheamus versus Orton was at least building to be a good world title match until the bad finish. This one was never close. I liked the match and I liked the story. I didn't think it was quote unquote so old. I don't know, maybe because I watched it in a vacuum today. What'd you think? I mean, did you think this was a bad match?
No, I don't think the match was bad. Maybe it's the story's a little bit, if you go back and really sort through it, okay, a week earlier, Kane is saying that he found his brother basically comatose, right? And now he's punishing everybody that he thought might have had something to do with it. So there's that brother loyalty. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, then a week later, now they're going after each other. Doesn't make a lot of sense if you really think about it. I mean, it's just, you've got big stars showing up and in the match, and it's exciting, and you're putting Rey behind the 8 ball. But, a lot of times just for the sake of the pop, you lose the story. And this could have been one of those situations. It's as a fan, would you rather have a little bit of a discombobulated story, but get to see all the stars, or have the story intact and not see them? That's the big question. I guess if you're paying pay-per-view prices, to your point, you want to see all the stars and see them popping up at, different times that you don't expect.
Well, also too, I mean, I don't think it is a convoluted story. I take issue with the way Meltzer sort of wrote here that, oh, this swerve didn't make any sense. No, it did make sense. Like, Kane beat up his brother and made it look like somebody else did it. And when he thought, hey, I'm going to get away with it, and he starts smiling after Rey swears to Undertaker he didn't do it, he realizes, oh shit, it was my brother who did it. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was a good story and sort of classic old school wrestling, and Meltzer just disagreed, I guess.
Well, I guess you had to just wait till it all played out. You got the explanation.
Well, we're going to get an explanation with this next match. What we're about to see here is the longest match in SummerSlam history. It goes 35 minutes and 15 seconds. That is indeed a SummerSlam record. The previous record was 94 with Bret and Owen inside a steel cage for the world title. That went 32 minutes and 22 seconds. As a reminder, Nexus has been running roughshod since June 7th on Raw, when they attacked Cena, Punk, and the entire ringside crew. The following week, the then general manager, Bret Hart, refused to give them contracts, and as a result, they attacked him, which forced Vince McMahon to appoint a new anonymous GM, who then signed all the members of the Nexus to the show. What'd you think about the anonymous GM angle?
Hokey.
It's terrible, was it not?
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, it was bad. You can't have just some phantom guy that's got all the authority that's booking all the matches. It takes that stretch of believability, and it goes way, way, way too far. And I think it just did. It was just, it was cute for a week or two, but it still didn't make sense unless you were going to have a reveal, and you never had a reveal. It's just blink, blink, and there was the GM that nobody knew who it was, making career decisions on people's lives.
Nexus is going to continue to attack various wrestlers and crew, costing Cena, costing the WWE Championship. I mean, they're just running roughshod, a fatal 4-way, Money in the Bank. And then in July, Cena finally confronts them. They offer him a place in their stable, which he refuses, and then reveals that he's assembled his own crew that he's going to call Team WWE. It includes Edge, Chris Jericho, John Morrison, R-Truth, The Great Khali, and unbelievably, Bret Hart. On July 26th, the Raw anonymous GM changes the match to an elimination match, and then there's dissension in Cena's team in the following weeks. Edge and Jericho, they have their own thing going on. This is an interesting concept, but it does feel like, I mean, I don't know. Is this a little hot shotted to you? Did they go to this too soon, do you think? Or did Nexus lose too soon? What's your takeaway from the whole Nexus thing and maybe what could have been?
They should have went on. Those guys should have been shoved for another year and a half before you ever put a chink in their armor. You're talking about earlier, Vince was talking about, I mean, you said that the quote was, we're going to turning this thing around to the stockholders, right? We're going to integrate our new talent with our old talent.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going to get business turned around. Well, the one thing that it takes forever to accomplish, and it's not that easy these days, and it wasn't that easy back then, the hardest thing to do is get heat, to get legitimate heat on talent. And you have these Nexus guys who were everything that Vince wanted. They were young, they were athletic, they were all different, but it was an influx of young guys and some of them very good performers, a lot of them good performers for that time. And when you've got 7 in a group, they should have dominated everything and everybody on both shows. And it would just be get your booking creative enough to make that happen, because those guys you could have put so much heat on, they shouldn't have got beat for another year and a half, because the story was in place. There were a team of 7. You jump on one of them or 2 of them, you jump on 7 of them. And it'll work if you just do it in the proper context. So I don't think any of them should have gotten beat that night. Any of them should have got left laying. Cena, it would have been very easy to write the story that everybody was jealous, on the babyface side of Cena, or you assumed, or that was the perception of, and he was having a hard time getting partners because, everybody wanted Cena out of the way so they could move up the ladder. There were so many stories you could have written which would have made sense, but in the process, the Nexus were the benefactors, because the fact that all the other guys couldn't get together in the company to form a team strong enough to beat them and let those guys just continue to have their way. And it would have worked, and it would have drawn money. But the minute you start beating them and leaving 2 or 3 of them laying, when it's just one guy, just doesn't make sense. You have to make sense where the numbers are involved.
Excuse me. We talked about it at the top of the show here. Nexus gets a ton of heat coming out. Meltzer says, given that it looks like this show did far better than last year based on one match, the idea of allowing heels to get and keep heat may not be the worst idea this year. Miz came out to be the 7th guy, but Cena told him that they wouldn't wait for him to make up his mind until the day of, and they had already secured a partner, and it was Daniel Bryan. And Bryan opens the match with hard kicks to Darren Young and goes for a guillotine and gets a tap in just 45 seconds. Lots of talent here on both sides. Let's recap who all's in it. Of course, our team leader is John Cena. He's got Daniel Bryan as the mystery guy, Chris Jericho, Edge, R-Truth, John Morrison, and Bret Hart, of all people. Nexus is led by Wade Barrett. They've got David Otunga, Heath Slater, Skip Sheffield, Darren Young, Michael Tarver, and Justin Gabriel. It is an elimination match. Talk to me about Michael Tarver. He's a name that we haven't heard a ton about. For whatever reason, maybe this whole WWE venture didn't go exactly as they had originally hoped. Still a young guy. I think he's only like 43 years old. What can you tell us about Michael Tarver?
Well, I didn't know Michael that well. I know he had a good look with, he had the mask on and, good physique and all that stuff. He did a boxer gimmick. He had a good punch. Don't know Michael that well. I wasn't around him very much. I just know that he was handpicked to be in that group, and there was probably a reason for that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, less than a year from this, after being in the main event here at SummerSlam, he's gone. I think he leaves in June of 2011, did some stuff with the NWA and New Japan. And I'm not even sure what he's really doing in wrestling these days, but it feels weird that, you're in the main event a year later, not so much. Another guy that we don't hear a ton about here, Justin Gabriel, who we know is wrestling as PJ Black now. He too has a similar story. He winds up, ultimately having a decent little run with the WWE and finds his way out a handful of years later, does a stop off with TNA. And I think he's done some stuff with Ring of Honor and the NWA and Lucha Underground. So he's kept active, but mostly outside of WWE in recent years. Why don't you think PJ Black or Justin Gabriel here was a lifer with WWE?
Oh, I don't know. Once they started breaking the crew up, each time that they got smaller and guys were going different ways, the whole Nexus thing just kind of disintegrated, and it left a lot of guys on the sidelines. And I know just recently, just a few weeks ago, I was watching Impact and not Impact. I was watching Ring of Honor, excuse me, and PJ Black was on there, and it looked to be a semi-recent match, probably within the last 6-8 months. He had a match with another guy on there, and they tore the joint down. So he can still perform, that's for sure. Don't know what he's been doing. I know that he had a real bad accident doing one of those things he does, like I don't know if it was skydiving or something else, but he got injured real bad a while back, and he had to recover from that. Took quite a while, but he's back because this seemed to be a semi. Like I said, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, I saw him on that show. He had a great match.
Yeah, he's still with Ring of Honor, but it's just curious to me that, this is a guy who's with the company. I think he started in developmental in like 2008 maybe, and he's with you guys until like January of 2015, and right around Royal Rumble 2015, he either asked for his release or was granted it, whatever. But it's always been fascinating to me that it really feels like there's almost two kinds of wrestlers: guys who, work their whole career to get to WWE and try to get there and stay there. And even when they leave, they're trying to get back. Then you got other guys who are like, I tried it and this is too political, too corporate, too whatever, but it's just not a good fit for me. And it's not often that you see a guy make a decision like that, but clearly he did and seems to be doing just fine. Is that fair to say that maybe there's just, cause we even talked about recently on an Ask Arn episode about Bullet Bob Armstrong and maybe what his national appeal could have been had he chose something different, but he had such a good deal for himself in Pensacola that his quality of life was just through the roof. Why try to do anything different? Do you think there's just some guys who maybe WWE was their dream and then they get there and realize, well, this isn't what I hoped it was. I'm going to go back and do what I was doing before.
Well, you got to understand when you take these young guys and you either bring them up from indies and you put them in the system, NXT, or they go, exclusively to NXT or whatever the case was. And then you bring them up to the main roster, they get their proverbial fit Finley 3 weeks. If they're brought up to be used right away. If those guys don't blow the roof off the world in 3 weeks, a lot of times they just get forgot about. That was it. You didn't pass the test. And especially when guys are put in a position to get a push, they're out there on TV, they're doing well, and for whatever reason, somebody sours on them and they just cut their water off out of nowhere. And you see it all the time. Now, some people, can accept that because they're getting paid and they get their water cut off and they are relegated to the sidelines and they're at TV every week after week after week, but they don't get used. And for whatever reason, guys can go on for months and months without ever being on television. And you go back and say, what did they do wrong? And nobody can ever put their finger on anything they did wrong other than the mood changed where they were concerned. Suddenly one day somebody walked in and said, they're too short. They're too small. They're too tall. They're too skinny. They're too this. They're too that. And they get their water cut off. A lot of this young talent, that just crushes them. The ones that really want to contribute and want to be on television and be in angles and be wrestling and be on all the house shows, they don't want to just sit home and get their downside. And a lot of those guys in Nexus, were good performers. The Heath Slaters, the Wade Barretts, PJ Black, a lot of those guys, and I'm sure I'm leaving some guys out. I know there were 7 of them, but a lot of those guys were really quality workers. And there's nothing worse than to have something to offer and not be able to offer it for whatever reason. And no one can tell you why that you're not being used. PJ Black, I guess, figured out he wasn't going to get used. I remember there was periods of time where they wouldn't use him on TV at all. So that, here's a guy that was young. What was he, third generation wrestler, maybe?
Yeah, he's been a wrestler. I mean, it's in his family for sure.
Yeah, I know at least second generation, and I may have made that up about third, but the guy wants to go out and do what he does and perform on television and all those things. And you get to a point to where you see that you're never going to be used. You just want to go out and wrestle anywhere. And it stops being about the money so much. It's about, this is what I always wanted to do. This is what I grew up wanting to do. I'm here. Why won't they use me? And it's pretty debilitating to a young guy's mentality. I know that.
Let's talk about a couple other guys here. David Otunga is a guy who I think a lot of people assumed, well, he's going to blow it out in a major way. And he's still a part of WWE, but more of a non-wrestling capacity these days. What can you tell us about David Otunga and his in-ring stuff? And I mean, because we can see him in a big role here, main eventing SummerSlam, and now maybe used as more of a panelist and color commentator and things like that. But he's been a part of the company for, 12 years now.
Is he still on the announce team occasionally?
I think so. Yeah. I think he's the occasional panelist.
Well, I think that nobody had a better look than Otunga. He was part of that Nexus group, but once they singled him out and tried to make him a single or put him in a tag matches, and then they left him off for long periods of time, for whatever reason that was, before they decided, okay, I think, the attraction was his look, fact that he had been to law school. The biggest of them all was who his wife was.
Jennifer
Huge
Hudson.
megastar.
Yeah.
And I believe, maybe off, but I don't think so. One of the biggest, wish list things, or one of the things the company was hoping for, was that at some point his wife was going to sing the national anthem at WrestleMania. Would have been another good reason to keep David around and take care of him and keep paying him. Seems like a natural fit. Well, she has a record label that might not want to associate her with wrestling. Who knows? These are just speculations on my part, but I feel like that's probably what the wish list was, and that was never going to happen, but they kept him around, but in the process, he wasn't getting in the ring. He wasn't wrestling. He wasn't getting better. During all of these periods of time where you see guys go away, Conrad, at whatever point in their career it is, but they are not on TV, but they're still with the company, those guys are not getting reps. They're not going down to the school on their own and wrestling 3 or 4 times a week. They're basically just sitting home. And I don't know that the company would say that's the right thing to do, or we don't want you to go down there and get hurt. So if we do need you, I don't know how that rhetoric goes by, but if you're not wrestling every day, it's the only thing you can do to stay in ring shape is wrestle. You can pound a Stairmaster all day long. It won't matter. You can lift weights all day long. It won't matter. The only way to stay in ring shape is you got to get in there and wrestle, and you got to do it frequently. You got to get those reps, timing and breathing and keeping your body, used to taking that pounding. That's all things that only reps will give you. So, those guys that disappear, they're just sitting home, and I think Dave was one of them.
Last but certainly not least, Wade Barrett, the leader of NXT. I think a lot of people assumed this guy was going to be one of the next big things. And we know that, he had a couple of different incarnations. They tried him as King Barrett. They tried him as Bad News Barrett. And then ultimately he decides that, I think I've maybe had enough. His contract is scheduled to end in June of 2016. But WWE agrees to an early release from his contract. So he gets out, I think in like August of 2015, and he's done. I mean, he did a little bit of stuff with the NWA and some stuff overseas, but it looks like he's trying his hand away from wrestling. Do you think, the WWE thing sort of soured him on wrestling for good, or is this something that's just hard to get out of your blood and he'll be back. It's just a matter of if and when in the right circumstance.
Well, he was good. He had everything. He spoke well. He looked good, good size, all those things. And he was a good worker. And there was really no negatives to Wade. But I'm sure, you got to remember, Conrad, we went through a period of 2001 to 2019 to where there was really only one company that you could go to in the U.S. and make a really, really good living. Now, I know you had the other companies around. You had New Japan, you had Impact, you had Ring of Honor, you had a few scattered companies around, but basically there was only one place to work and make a consistent living where you can plan your future 3 years out and know what you're going to be making and sign a long-term deal, which, goes a long way with people when they're trying to plan their lives. And there was only the one company. And if you soured on the business and you left WWE, you just about had to, visit the real world and see what was available, because those other companies were not running 250 days and, constant television, and pay-per-views and all those things that WWE was able to do. They were the only game in town, really. So I think once you left WWE, like Wade did, he started researching some acting and some other things, another way to have life after, wrestling. And I don't know exactly what all he did, but I saw that he did come back with the NWA and was doing some commentary and some different stuff. But got to remember, there were not a lot of options during that 18-year span.
Let's talk about the match itself here. One of the big spots in the show is when Bret Hart tags in, and he's going to be wrestling Heath Slater. He's going to throw some punches and do a reverse atomic drop and go for the sharpshooter. And Meltzer would know Hart can't do a match because he can't bump or take any shots, but his movement and offense look good. And it was actually incredible considering he's 53, has an artificial knee, and has suffered a serious stroke. Barrett threw in a chair, and Hart uses the chair on Skip Sheffield, easy for me to say, who we know is Ryback, for the DQ in 12 minutes and 10 seconds. Meltzer would say the crowd was genuinely mad when Hart was eliminated, and he was the only guy in the match you could really say that about. Ultimately, we know the story though. Cena's going to put the STF on Barrett in the middle of the ring, and he's going to tap after 35 minutes and 19 seconds, 3.5 stars. A lot of action, a lot of talent. The fans are really behind Daniel Bryan in a big way here. This is probably one of those nights that sort of helped make Daniel Bryan who he's going to become. What'd you think of this one?
Yeah, I thought, what you walked away with was it was the right thing to bring Daniel Bryan back. It was all about him, and it was the beginnings of the guy becoming a megastar. And if you didn't just see it with your own eyes and understand what you were seeing, then it was just too bad, because they got behind him that night in a very real way. And when a guy gets over, when it clicks for a guy and the audience accepts him and he makes that, connection with the audience, it's crystal clear to see. And that's what you took away from that night. That was the positive.
Meltzer would also do a poll in this era for all the pay-per-views, and it was pretty unanimous that Team WWE versus the Nexus, the main event, was the best match on the show. It got 179 votes. The only other match to get a vote was Sheamus and Randy Orton. The worst match, also nearly unanimous, it's Melina and Alicia Fox. What about you? Do you think the best match was the main event?
Well, probably so. You got to remember, you had some pretty good performers in there, the Jerichos and the Edges, and, there were some other underlying stories within that match too. And they had plenty of time. But I think, and it should. The main event on a pay-per-view should be just that, the main event. And it should button up your stories that are drawing the money and selling the tickets. And you have, you build your show least to most. And I think that was a main event and told a lot of stories. And, you could have still got out of there, I think, with some serious heat on the Nexus, but that's just my opinion.
Chris Jericho also had a report once upon a time that said that it was Vince McMahon's idea for Cena to be the sole survivor of a 7-on-7 match, even as Jericho and others felt that Wade Barrett needed to go over in order to keep the Nexus strong. Justin Gabriel has said that Cena himself had the finish changed to him winning. Gabriel said that he had no bad feelings towards Cena. It was just a bad call. And Jericho and Edge apparently also disagree with Cena's idea that Barrett needed to DDT him on bare concrete just before the Superman comeback, where he would pin Gabriel and then make Barrett submit to the STF. I think Jericho felt that Cena needed to barely survive in a more realistic manner, but he says Cena was insistent that it be done this way. And Jericho also claims in the aftermath of the show that night that Cena admitted he was wrong about how the finish went down. You were involved in all of this. You were Cena's agent. Do you remember there being discussion about the finish and about the DDT and how Nexus needed to be positioned? And what was your advice to John that night?
Well, I don't remember. I think that when you got down to the last 3 or 4 guys, you're talking about overcoming that DDT on the floor and all that. That probably would have been a closed door meeting with only one person that could make that happen, because to anybody that knows anything about the business, why you would basically no sell that and become Superman and overcome all the other odds to just win is part of the reason that Cena gets all the backlash from everybody that he does. All those that are anti-Cena, it's for situations just like that. And if all those minds that you're talking about, are feeling like the same way, that if John's going to win and survive, okay, but it should be by the skin of his teeth, everybody can't be wrong. And so I think they were correct in that. I think you hurt John more than you helped him. And again, even if you did have John sneak one out, a quick 1, 2, 3, you could let that sink in for just a second and still have 3 of the Nexus guys there to go ahead and just squash him. And here's another mistake, just while I'm thinking about it, that was made over the years. There was this ongoing, Conrad, there's this ongoing feeling that at the end of any pay-per-view or any house show for that matter, or any event, you want to leave the people happy going home.
Right.
Why? Why do you always have to do that?
Well, you didn't on Nitro. A lot of times there would be trash filled in the ring with the NWO taking over. So if you're quote unquote booking heat, you've got to send them home frustrated and every now and again, right?
Yep. The difference is you never, ever booked heat ever at the end of the night for a pay-per-view or a house show. And why not? That would have been a classic example of getting a victory, but having the young guys leave Cena, in a heap. You would have gotten some heat and you would have gotten to that next Raw, and I would have still been chomping at the bit for the good guys to shut these guys up, and you just don't give it to them. You keep it going. In the old days, in the NWA, a lot of times, most times on television, we would go off the air with heat because you wanted people to come out to the live events and see you get your ass kicked, but you had to pay for it. You didn't give it away on TV. You would have in live events, I know this is a little bit off the subject, but you would have a finish, where there would be the babyface would get splattered. There would be a DQ, maybe a chair shot or something from the heel, so the babyface technically won. Then he would overcome the chair shot and end up kicking everybody's ass anyway, just so you sent the crowd home happy. Well, if you can't hit a guy with a chair and make it stick, why do it anyway? And we would do that time after time after time. And if you go back and check the house show business, you know, we weren't full every night. So something needed to be changed. And I feel like this was one of those nights just to hulk up and become Superman and cream everybody and go over. I agree with Jericho and Edge. Should have went another route.
Well, we're glad that you guys are going another route with us and enjoying, or we hope you're enjoying this walk down memory lane from 2010 and 2015 that we're doing this year. Coming up next, and we're really excited about it. It'll be SummerSlam 2015. That's happening in 2 weeks. Next week is all about hashtag Ask Arn Anything. And you really can ask Arn anything. It's simple. Just follow us at the Arn Show. It'll be pinned to the top right there. Drop your question below and ta-da. Listen up. And on August 18th, we could be asking your question. Again, we'll be back on the 25th with SummerSlam 2015. And don't forget, you can get all of these shows early and ad free, including watching a couple of War Games from back in the day. That's right. The original and the sequel to War Games from 1987 are both going to be posted live over there at adfreeshows.com. Check us out online as well. We've got great new shirts, and Arn, I don't even know that you've seen all of these, but we've got some really cool new shirts over at arnshirts.com. Take a look. We've got a new one that I saw in person for the first time. Dave Silva came to visit, and he had the Founding Horsemen shirt, which is an old school photo style shirt of you. But maybe my favorite, and one that you even said, hey, do we make this in different cuts? Is you with the American flag on your face? Those are cool shirts over at arnshirts.com. Are they not?
Yeah, those guys do a great job. They really do. Very creative.
And we appreciate your support. That's the easiest way to support the show. Of course, follow us on Twitter. It's free. It's at the Arn Show. He is at the Arn Show. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll see you next week and every week right here on Westwood One. It's Tuesday. That's got to mean one thing. It's Arn.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.